He turned 18 and was handed a cardboard box. His sister, who was not yet 18, was told to stay behind. They didn't listen. What they found next wasn't just a home. It was a second chance carved out of the earth itself. If you've ever felt like the world had no place for you, hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. It's for all of us who've had to build our own shelter from the storm. The air on my 18th birthday tasted like recycled oxygen and disinfectant. For 2 years, that was the smell of my life, the smell of the group home. It was the scent of being a file in a cabinet, a line item on a budget. Mrs. Gable, my caseworker for the final 6 months, stood in the linoleum-floored entryway with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a practiced, gentle, and utterly vacant smile. She held the box. Inside was everything the state had catalogued as mine. 3 worn-out T-shirts, a cracked photo of a mother I barely remembered, a paperback copy of a book about stars, and my birth certificate. The official proof I existed, and the official notice that, as of 9:32 a.m. that morning, my existence was no longer their problem. "Well, Leo," she said, her voice smooth as a river's stone, "you're a man now. The world is waiting." The world felt less like it was waiting and more like it was hiding, hoping I wouldn't find it. I took the box. It was lighter than it should have been. It felt like 18 years of life shouldn't be this easy to carry. My sister Maya stood just behind Mrs. Gable's shoulder, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She was 16. Her eyes, the same deep brown as mine, were wide with a silent, screaming panic that I felt in my own gut. In 2 years, she'd be standing here, getting her own box. Been provided with resources. There's a list of shelters in his exit packet. He has options. Options. The word sounded hollow. A shelter cot, a spot in a line for a lukewarm meal. These weren't options. They were just different cages. I looked at Maya, and a promise I'd made to her in the dark of our first night in foster care echoed in my head. "I won't leave you behind, ever." I couldn't break it. Not today, not ever. I nodded at Mrs. Gable, forcing my face into a mask of calm I didn't feel. "Thank you for everything." It was a lie, but it was the polite lie the system expected. She handed me a large manila envelope, separate from the box. "This is the rest of your file. Personal effects that were held in administrative storage. Legally, they're yours now." I tucked it under my arm. It felt heavier than the box. I met Maya's eyes one last time. I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Be ready." She nodded back, her expression grim. I turned and walked out the heavy steel door, which clicked shut behind me with the finality of a gavel. The spring air was cool and smelled of damp earth and car exhaust. It was the smell of freedom, and it was terrifying. I walked to the bus stop at the end of the long driveway, my hands shaking. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. 10 minutes later, as the city bus hissed to a stop in front of me, Maya came running down the driveway, a single backpack slung over her shoulder. She'd slipped out a back door while Mrs. Gable was filing my closure paperwork. Her face was flushed, her breathing ragged. She didn't say a word, just fell into step beside me as we climbed onto the bus. The driver didn't even look at us. We were just 2 more ghosts in the machine. We sat in the back, the box on my lap, the envelope beside me, Maya's backpack at her feet. We didn't know where we were going. We just knew we were going there together. The bus lurched forward, pulling us away from the only home we'd had for 2 years. a home I was legally barred from, and a home she had just illegally fled. My hand trembled as I reached for the manila envelope. My name was typed on the front. It felt like a final judgment. Inside, past the dry legal notices and transitional housing pamphlets, was a smaller, older envelope. It was yellowed with age. My grandmother's spidery handwriting scrawled across the front. For Leo's 18th birthday. My breath caught in my throat. Grandma Elara. She'd been gone for 5 years. She was the one who raised us after our mom left. Her death was what landed us in the system in the first place. I thought everything of hers was gone, sold off to pay debts. I tore it open. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a small, tarnished brass key, taped to a folded piece of paper. I unfolded the paper. It was a receipt from a place called Safe Haven Storage in a town I'd never heard of, Quarry's End. The receipt was for Unit 237. The stunning part was the date. It was dated a week before she died, and it was a payment receipt, paid in full for 5 years. The final line item made my heart stop. Annual renewal fee, $5. That was it, $5. A key, a receipt, and a promise from a ghost. Maya leaned over, her shoulder pressing against mine, and read the paper with me. "Quarry's End?" she whispered. "Where's that?" I pulled out my phone, the one I'd saved for months to buy. The battery was at 42%. I typed in the town name. It was a tiny dot on the map, 150 miles away, nestled in the foothills of the mountains. A place built on rock and forgotten by time. "It's out there," I said, my voice hoarse. "A long way from here." We looked at each other. We had a total of $74 between us. A bus ticket to Quarry's End would cost nearly half of that for the two of us. It was a gamble. A storage unit that had been sitting for 5 years could be empty. It could be full of junk. Or it could be the only thing our grandmother had left to give us. It was the only thread we had, the only direction to go that wasn't a homeless shelter or back to the system that had just spit me out. "We go," Maya said, her voice firm, all the panic gone, replaced by a sliver of steel I recognized from our grandmother. "We go see what she left us." I nodded, the fear in my chest finally giving way to a spark. A tiny, fragile flicker of something that might have been hope. For $5 a year, our grandmother had kept a secret waiting for us. We were going to find out what it was. The bus station was a purgatory of flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee and desperation. We bought 2 one-way tickets to Quarry's End. The woman behind the glass didn't bat an eye. To her, we were just 2 more kids running away from something, or maybe, if she was an optimist, towards something. The purchase left us with $41. $41, a box of memories, a backpack of stolen clothes, and a key to a mystery. The ride was 6 hours long, with 1 transfer in a town that was little more than a gas station and a diner. As the city skyline dissolved into sprawling suburbs, then into flat farmland, and finally began to crumple into rolling hills, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease for the first time in years. The gray, concrete world I knew was being replaced by deep greens and earthy browns. The sky seemed bigger out here, the clouds more defined. Maya fell asleep against the window, her breath fogging the glass. I watched her, the fierce, protective love I felt for her, a physical ache in my chest. She was all I had. I clutched the key in my pocket, its metal shining in the light. It was a key to a world I didn't know, a world I didn't want to know. I clutched the key in my pocket, its metal warmed by my hand. What was Grandma Elara thinking? She wasn't a woman for grand gestures. She was practical, a gardener who knew that good things grew slowly, with patience and care. She saved string and reused tea bags. Paying for a storage unit for 5 years after her death was not in her character. It was an act of profound, almost desperate foresight. What did she know was coming? What had she been trying to protect us from? The questions circled in my mind as the bus climbed higher, the engine groaning in protest. The towns grew smaller, the spaces between them wider. Quarry's End wasn't so much a town as a place the road passed through. We got off at the only stop, a lone bench outside a general store with a faded Coca-Cola sign. The air was different here. It was clean, crisp, with a scent of pine and damp stone. The silence was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't the absence of noise, it was a presence. The hum of the bus fading down the road was replaced by the rustle of wind in the tall trees and the distant cry of a hawk. It was a silence that made you feel small, but not insignificant. Safe Haven Storage was a half-mile walk down the main road. It was a row of faded blue garage doors set against a backdrop of a sheer granite cliff face. A single dusty office had a sign in the window. Manager on site 9 to 4, Monday to Friday. It was 3:45 on a Tuesday. We were just in time. An old man with a face like a road map and kind, watery eyes looked up from his newspaper as we entered. "Help you, kids?" he asked, his voice gravelly. I held up the key and the receipt. "We're here for Unit 237. It was my grandmother's, Hilara Vance." The man's eyebrows shot up. Hilara? Lord, I haven't heard that name in years. She was a good woman, quiet, kept to herself, paid on time every time, paid years in advance, in fact. He squinted at the receipt. "Well, I'll be. It's all in order." He lumbered out from behind the desk and led us down the row of doors. The place was clean, but old. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the quiet afternoon. He stopped in front of a door at the far end, right up against the rock wall. "Here she is, 237. He took a small key from a ring on his belt and unlocked the heavy-duty padlock that was already there, a service the facility provided. "The lock inside is yours," he said, handing me a can of spray lubricant. "Might be stiff after all this time." I slid the old brass key into the lock. It was stiff. I put my shoulder into it, spraying the lubricant, and finally, with a groan of protesting metal, the lock turned. The sound was deafening in the silence. The old man gave us a nod. "Give a holler if you need a handcart. I'll be in the office." He walked away, leaving us alone in front of the door. Maya and I looked at each other. This was it, the moment of truth. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I took a deep breath, grabbed the handle, and pulled. The roll-up door was heavy, and it screamed in protest, sending a cascade of rust flakes down onto the concrete. As the door rose, it revealed the darkness within. A wave of cool, musty air washed over us. It smelled of old paper, dried lavender, and something else, the faint, earthy scent of soil. It was the smell of our grandmother's house. It was the smell of the only real home we'd ever known. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom. The unit wasn't packed to the gills. It was neat, organized. A few stacks of carefully labeled boxes. An old wooden rocking chair draped in a white sheet. A small cedar chest. And leaning against the back wall, a collection of gardening tools. A shovel, a rake, a pickaxe, all clean, their wooden handles worn smooth with use. It was a time capsule, a deliberate, carefully curated collection of a life. She knew, Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She saved all this for us. We started with the boxes. One was labeled Photos. Inside, we found our entire childhood. Pictures of us as babies, as toddlers running through sprinklers. Pictures of our mother, young and smiling, before the sadness took over. And pictures of Grandma Elara, her face etched with laugh lines, her hands always covered in dirt from her garden. We sat on the dusty concrete floor, passing the photos back and forth, the small beam of my phone light illuminating a life we thought was lost forever. We cried, not loud, sobbing cries, but quiet, steady tears. Tears for the woman who had loved us so fiercely, and tears for the years we'd lost. In another box, labeled Books, we found her collection of geology texts and local history guides. Grandma had been a rockhound, a hobbyist geologist. She loved the earth, not for what you could take from it, but for the stories it told. The final box was heavier than the rest. It was a small metal footlocker, the kind soldiers use. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of old blankets, were 2 items. The first was a thick stack of envelopes, tied with a faded ribbon. They were letters, all addressed to me and Maya in our grandmother's handwriting. The second was a long, rolled-up tube of drafting paper. I carefully unrolled it. It was a survey map of a piece of land, a small 5-acre parcel, according to the markings. There was a hand-drawn circle in the middle of the plot, with an arrow pointing to it. Next to the arrow, our grandmother had written 2 words, "The Shelter." Tucked into the roll was a folded, official-looking document. A deed. The property, 5 acres of unincorporated land in the Quarry's End foothills, was registered in her name. Stapled to the back was a legally executed transfer of ownership to be enacted upon my 18th birthday. The property was now legally mine. We owned land. We were homeless. We had less than $50 to our names, but we owned a piece of the earth. I picked up the stack of letters. The one on top was marked, "Read this first." My hands were shaking so badly, Maya had to help me open it. The letter was dated the day before she went into the hospital for the last time. My dearest Leo and Maya, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the world has not been as kind to you as I'd prayed it would be. I am so sorry. I tried to prepare for this. I tried to make sure you would be safe. This world can be hard on children with soft hearts, and yours are the softest I know. I have not left you much money. There was none to leave. The medical bills took everything. But I have left you something better, I hope. I have left you a place. It is not a house. It is not fancy. Most people would call it worthless. But it is yours. It is safe. It is hidden. For years I have known this day might come. I saw the shadows in your mother's eyes, and I knew I had to build a lifeboat for you, just in case. This land is your lifeboat. The map will show you where to go. The tools will help you when you get there. The letters will explain the rest. Be brave, my darlings. Be kind to each other, and know that my love is with you, always. All you have to do is listen for it in the quiet places. Your loving grandmother, Elara. I finished reading, my vision blurred by tears. Maya was leaning against me, her own tears soaking the shoulder of my shirt. A lifeboat. Not an inheritance, not a property, but a lifeboat. Grandma hadn't just left us a piece of land. She had left us a plan, a chance. We spent the night in a cheap motel down the road, the first one we saw. We paid in cash. It took most of our remaining money, but we couldn't sleep in the storage unit, and we were too exhausted to do anything else. We lay on the two lumpy beds, the map and the deed spread out between us, the stack of letters on the nightstand like a holy text. We didn't talk much. We just looked at the map, at the small, insignificant-looking square of green that was now the center of our universe. The next morning, we bought a cheap compass, a couple of bottles of water, and a bag of trail mix at the general store for a piece of land. Vance property. Her for a piece of land. Vance property. Her eyes lit up with recognition. Old Alara's plot? Sure, I know it. Nobody's been up there in years. She used to come in here, covered in dirt, smiling like she'd found a diamond. Said the rocks up there told her stories. She gave us directions to an old, overgrown logging trail that would get us close. It's a steep climb, she warned. Watch for loose rock. The hike was harder than we expected. The trail was barely there, a faint suggestion of a path choked with weeds and fallen branches. The air grew thinner, cooler. The sounds of the road faded away, replaced by the chirping of unseen birds and the whisper of the wind through the pines. We used the map and compass, navigating by the landmarks Grandma Elara had sketched in the margins. Split boulder, lightning-struck pine, creek bed. After 2 hours of climbing, we found it. A small, rusted metal stake in the ground, marking the corner of the property. We had arrived. The land was wild. It was a steep, wooded hillside, thick with trees and tangled undergrowth. It didn't look like much. It looked like every other piece of wilderness on the mountain. But it was ours. We pushed our way through the brush, following the map's contours toward the center of the property, toward the circle she had marked, the shelter. We were looking for a shed, maybe an old hunting cabin, some kind of structure. We found nothing. We searched for an hour, our hopes starting to curdle into disappointment. Maybe we'd misread the map. Maybe whatever was here was long gone, reclaimed by the forest. I was about to give up when Maya called out, "Leo, over here!" She was standing at the base of a huge rock outcropping, a sheer wall of granite that jutted out from the hillside. It was covered in moss and vines, almost perfectly camouflaged. But at the bottom, tucked behind a curtain of hanging ferns, was a dark opening. It wasn't large, maybe 4 feet high and 3 feet wide. A shadow in the stone. "No way," I breathed. I crawled through the ferns, my heart pounding. A blast of cold, still air hit my face. It smelled of deep earth, of stone and dampness and absolute stillness. I shone my phone's flashlight inside. It wasn't a shallow overhang. It was a cave. The entrance opened into a chamber, roughly the size of a small living room. The floor was mostly level, packed earth and sand. The ceiling was high above my head, a natural dome of solid rock. In the center of the chamber was a primitive fire pit, the stones blackened with ancient soot. And against the back wall, we saw it, a wooden crate covered in a dusty tarp. This was the shelter. Not a building, but a part of the mountain itself. A place carved by water and time, waiting for us. We dragged the crate into the sunlight. Inside, there were blankets, a small camp stove with a full fuel canister, a cast-iron pot, a first aid kit, and another, smaller, sealed metal box. This one contained matches, candles, and more letters. A whole bundle of them, each one numbered. The letter on top was marked Number 2, Welcome Home. My dearest children, if you have found this place, then you have followed the map, and you have been brave. Welcome home. This cave is not a palace, I know, but it is safe. It is dry. It is hidden. It will protect you from the wind and the rain while you figure out your next steps. I found it years ago when I was exploring these hills. The locals have always known about the bear's den, as they call it, but no one ever comes up here. The land is too steep to build on, the soil too rocky to farm. They think it's worthless. I knew it was priceless. Over the years, I brought things up here, a little at a time. The things you would need, a secret nest just for my little birds. I know you are scared, but you are not alone. You have each other, and you have this place. This rock will hold you. It is older than any trouble you will ever face. Make a fire, boil some water. Read the next letter when you are ready. I am with you. Love, Grandma. We did as she said. We gathered wood. We started a fire in the old stone pit. The smoke curled up and found its way out through a natural fissure in the ceiling, a perfect chimney. We boiled water and drank the hot tea we found in the crate. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, we sat in the mouth of our cave, wrapped in blankets, and felt the warmth of the fire on our faces. We were dirty, exhausted, and we had almost no money. We were, by any normal definition, in a terrible situation. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt safe. I felt the deep, unshakable security of the mountain at my back. We weren't in a file anymore. We weren't a number. We were home. The first week was a blur of discovery. We explored every inch of our 5 acres. We found a small spring with clear, cold water bubbling up from between 2 rocks, just as Grandma's map had promised. We cleared the brush from the cave entrance and made a small level terrace outside where we could sit by the fire. We learned the rhythms of the mountain, the way the light moved through the trees, the sound of the wind rising in the afternoon, the calls of the birds at dawn and dusk. Each night, by the light of the fire and a single candle, we would read one of our grandmother's letters. They were our Bible, our instruction manual, and our connection to the past. She told us about the land, about the types of trees and edible plants. She told us stories about our mother when she was a little girl, before the world broke her. She wrote about her own life, her love of geology, her quiet defiance in a world that often overlooked women who preferred rocks to parties. In letter number 7, she told us the secret. You must understand, my darlings, that the value of this land is not on the surface. It is within. When I first explored this cave, I noticed something strange about the rock formations deep inside. There is a secondary passage, hidden behind a loose section of the back wall. You will have to dig. Be careful. What you will find is a vein of pegmatite. That word won't mean much to you. But this is a special kind of pegmatite. It is rich with tourmaline and spodumene. And within the spodumene, if you know what to look for, you will find crystals of hiddenite. It is a rare gemstone, a beautiful pale green. They call it the evening emerald. It is not a diamond mine. It will not make you billionaires. But there is enough there, if managed carefully, to give you a foundation, to give you a choice. This is your inheritance, not the land, but the secret it holds. Do not tell anyone. Do not rush. The world is full of greedy men who would take this from you in a heartbeat. This knowledge is your power. Use it wisely. A gemstone vein, hidden in our cave. It felt like something out of a storybook. The next day, we found the loose wall she described. Using the pickaxe and shovel from the storage unit, we started to dig. The work was brutal. After hours of breaking up rock and hauling out buckets of debris, we broke through into another chamber. It was smaller, a tight fissure in the rock, but the walls glittered. In the beam of my flashlight, embedded in the coarse, pale granite, were long, dark crystals of tourmaline, and, deeper in, pockets of a translucent, pale green mineral that seemed to glow from within. Hiddenite. It was real. We held a piece in our hands, the rough stone cool against our skin. It was beautiful, but it was also terrifying. This secret changed everything. We weren't just two homeless kids squatting on a piece of worthless land anymore. We were guardians of something valuable. The weight of that responsibility settled on me. Grandma's warnings about greedy men echoed in my ears. We had to be careful. For a month, we lived a quiet, almost feral existence. We made trips into town only when necessary, to buy rice and beans and other supplies, paying with the last of our cash. We told the store owner we were camping, and she just smiled and sold us what we needed. We spent our days carefully, painstakingly, extracting a small handful of the green crystals. We read our grandmother's geology books, learning how to identify the best specimens. We were living in a cave, but we were also getting an education. We were learning to be self-sufficient. We were learning to be patient. We were healing. The raw, open wound of our past was slowly starting to scar over, protected by the silence of the forest and the solidity of the mountain. Then, one crisp autumn morning, the outside world found us. We were brewing tea over the fire when we heard the sound. A low crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs. Someone was coming up the trail. We quickly doused the fire and retreated into the shadows of the cave, my heart hammering in my chest. Two men emerged into the clearing. They wore clean, new hiking gear and carried clipboards. They looked completely out of place in the wildness of our woods. They looked at the hillside with a cold, appraising gaze. One of them pointed up toward the rock face, toward our cave. "The survey shows the main deposit runs right through this section," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "We'll need to blast this entire rock face to get access." Blast. The word hit me like a physical blow. They were talking about destroying our home. The other man made a note on his clipboard. "What about the title on this parcel? It's still privately held." "Some old woman's estate, transferred to an 18-year-old kid, probably has no idea what he's sitting on. Our legal team is drafting a preliminary offer. We'll offer him $20,000. He'll think he won the lottery. If he refuses, we'll find another way. Eminent domain, zoning variances. This project is too important. That lithium deposit is worth a fortune." Lithium. They weren't after our little vein of gemstones. They were after something much, much bigger. Our grandmother's hiddenite was just a tiny, sparkling clue to a massive mineral deposit that ran deep under the mountain. And we, and our cave, were sitting right on top of it. The men finished their survey and left. Maya and I stayed hidden in the cave for a long time, the silence they left behind feeling more threatening than their voices had. $20,000. A year ago, that amount of money would have seemed like a king's ransom. It could get us an apartment, a car, a normal life. It was the easy way out, the sensible choice. We could take the money and disappear, let them have their rock. But it wasn't just a rock. It was our home. It was our grandmother's legacy. It was the only thing in the world that was truly ours. "What are we going to do?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling. I looked around the cave, at the soot-stained walls, at our makeshift beds of pine boughs and blankets, at the geology books stacked neatly against the wall. This place had saved us. It had given us a shelter from the storm, just as Grandma had intended. We couldn't let them destroy it. "We fight," I said, the words feeling more certain than anything I'd ever said in my life. She told us to be brave. This is how we do it. We fight. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat by a small, smokeless fire and read the last of our grandmother's letters. The final one was in a sealed envelope, marked number 15, for when you have to make a choice. My darlings, there will come a day when the world will come knocking. They will want what you have. They will offer you money, and it will be tempting. It is the easy path. But I did not save this place for you so you could take the easy path. I saved it so you could learn to choose the right one. Inside this envelope, you will find my journals, my geological surveys, my notes. I knew about the lithium. I knew the scope of it. I mapped it for years. I also documented every rare plant, every animal track, every drop of water that flows from this mountain. This land is not just valuable for what is buried in it. It is valuable for what lives on it. The world will tell you that progress means tearing things down. But real progress, the kind that lasts, is about protecting what is precious. The choice will be yours. Sell your inheritance for a pocket full of cash, or fight for the soul of a mountain. Whatever you choose, do it with clear eyes and brave hearts. And know that I will be proud of you. I am always with you. Elara. We opened the package. It was a trove of information. Decades of meticulous, hand-drawn maps, water sample results, lists of endangered flora and fauna she had identified on the property. She had known all of it. The gemstones were just a breadcrumb trail she'd left for us. The real treasure was the knowledge. The proof that this land was more than just a mine in waiting. It was a living, breathing ecosystem. This was our weapon. The next day, a formal letter arrived, tacked to a tree at the edge of our property. It was from a law firm representing Apex Development Corp. It contained a formal offer of $25,000 for our 5 acres, and a subtle threat about the county's right to expropriate land for economic development. It gave us 30 days to respond. We walked into town and used the public library's computer. We looked up Apex Development. They were a massive corporation with a history of aggressive expansion and a team of high-priced lawyers. We looked up pro bono environmental lawyers. We found a non-profit called the Appalachian Justice Initiative. We sent them an email, a long, desperate plea, and attached a scanned copy of the offer letter. For a week, we heard nothing. The silence was agonizing. Every sound in the woods made us jump. We felt like we were being watched. The mountain, which had felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a fortress under siege. We started to lose hope. Maybe this was a fight we couldn't win. Maybe we should just take the money. Then, one afternoon, as we were heading back from the spring with water, we saw a beat-up old truck parked at the bottom of our trail. A woman was leaning against it, looking up the hill. She had graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and a no-nonsense look on her face. "Leo Vance?" she called out. Her voice was strong. We hesitated. "Who's asking?" I called back, my hand instinctively going to the small hatchet we kept on our belt. "My name is Sarah Jenkins," she said, holding up her hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm from the Appalachian Justice Initiative. I got your email." It felt like the clouds had parted. We led her up the trail to our cave. She didn't say a word about our living situation. She didn't judge. She just looked around with a thoughtful expression. We sat on a log outside the entrance and laid everything out for her, the deed, the letters, and finally our grandmother's journals and maps. She spent an hour poring over the journals, her expression growing more and more intent. She traced the lines on the maps with her finger, nodding to herself. Finally, she looked up, and for the first time, she smiled. "Your grandmother," she said, her voice filled with respect, was one heck of a woman. This isn't just a journal. This is a comprehensive, multi-year environmental impact study. She's documented a protected bat species roosting in this cave system and a rare orchid that only grows on this specific type of granite outcropping. And her water tables, my God, she's proven that the aquifer under this land feeds the entire watershed for Quarry's End. She looked at us, her eyes sharp and clear. Apex Development doesn't just want to build a mine. They want to poison a town's water supply and destroy a critical habitat to do it. And your grandmother has given us the ammunition to prove it. She paused, her smile fading into a serious line. But this is going to be a long, ugly fight. They're going to play dirty. They'll try to paint you as a couple of delinquent squatters. They will try to bury us in paperwork and legal fees. Are you ready for that? Maya and I looked at each other. We thought of our grandmother's words. Choose the right path, not the easy one. We thought of the quiet peace of this mountain, of the cold, clean water from the spring, of the feeling of safety this cave had given us when we had nothing else. Yes, I said, my voice steady. We're ready. Sarah Jenkins smiled again. Good. Then let's get to work. The fight was everything Sarah had warned it would be, and more. Apex's lawyers filed motion after motion. They hired private investigators who dug into our past, trying to find anything to discredit us. They leaked stories to the local paper, painting us as troubled runaways, trying to extort money from a company that just wanted to bring jobs to the area. It was draining. There were days I wanted to give up, to take the ever-increasing sums of money they offered us and just walk away. They went from 25,000 to 50, then to 100. It was life-changing money, and we were still living in a cave, washing our clothes in a bucket. But every time we felt like breaking, we would reread our grandmother's letters. We would look at her meticulous research, and we would look at Sarah, who fought for us with the ferocity of a mother bear. She never doubted us, not for a second. The tide began to turn when Sarah got the local news involved. A young, ambitious reporter came up to the property. We showed her the cave, the spring, the rare orchids our grandmother had documented. We told our story. The segment aired on the evening news. It showed the contrast. The two of us, quiet and determined, living in our simple shelter, against the slick corporate spokesman for Apex, talking about economic necessity. The people of Quarry's End, who had been wary of us, started to see things differently. They remembered Ilara Vance. They knew she was a good woman who loved the land. They relied on the water from the watershed. They started to show up at town hall meetings, holding signs that said, "Protect the mountain." The store owner started a collection jar for our legal defense fund. The old man from the storage unit dropped off a box of canned goods at the bottom of our trail. We weren't alone anymore. We had a community. The final battle was a hearing in front of the State Environmental Protection Board. Apex brought in a team of geologists and lawyers in expensive suits. We had Sarah, a stack of our grandmother's dusty journals, and a small box of the rare orchids, which we had gotten permission to present. The Apex geologist presented a slick slideshow full of charts and graphs, dismissing the environmental concerns as negligible. Then Sarah got up. She didn't use a slideshow, she just told the story. She told them about Ilara Vance and her love for the mountain. She presented Ilara's hand-drawn maps and water tests. She showed them the proof of the bat colony and the protected orchids. She made them see that this wasn't just a piece of rock to be exploited. It was a vital, fragile ecosystem. And then she called me to speak. I was terrified. I stood in front of a panel of stern-faced officials, my hands shaking. I just told them the truth. That mountain, that cave, "It's not just property to us," I said, my voice cracking at first, then growing stronger. "When we had nothing, it gave us a home. When we felt lost, it gave us a purpose. My grandmother didn't leave us money. She left us a responsibility to protect a place that had protected us. Please, don't let them tear it down." We waited 3 weeks for the decision. It was the longest 3 weeks of our lives. The letter came to Sarah's office. She drove out to our land to tell us in person. She got out of her truck, holding a white envelope, and her face was unreadable. My stomach twisted into a knot. "Well?" I asked, unable to bear the suspense. She broke into a huge grin. "We won," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "They denied the mining permit, unanimously. They've designated the entire area an environmental conservation zone." We had won. We had saved our home. That night, Maya and I sat outside the cave, looking up at the stars. The sky was clearer here than anywhere else I'd ever been. The silence of the mountain was no longer threatening. It was peaceful. It was the sound of our victory. We hadn't just won a legal battle. We had won back our future. We had honored our grandmother's legacy. We had learned that home isn't something you're given. It's something you build, something you defend, something you choose. And our home was a cave on the side of a mountain, a shelter carved from rock and love. Over the next 2 years, life changed, but slowly, and on our own terms. The story of our fight brought a quiet sort of fame. Geologists and botanists from the local university came to study the unique features of our land, a project our grandmother would have loved. They helped us properly document and protect the orchids in the bat colony. With their help, and a small grant they helped us secure, we were able to set up a conservation trust for the land, ensuring it would be protected forever. We used some of the grant money and the careful, sustainable harvesting of a few of the tourmaline and hiddenite crystals to make our home more livable. We didn't build a house. We honored the cave. We installed solar panels on a sunny patch of rock, giving us clean, quiet electricity. We ran a pipe from the spring, giving us running water. We built a small, insulated structure inside the main chamber, a wooden box with a wood stove, a couple of beds, a desk, and a bookshelf for Grandma's books. It was a ship in a bottle, a warm, dry nest inside the heart of the mountain. Maya finished high school through online classes and discovered she had a passion for botany, just like our grandmother. She's now taking college courses, studying the unique ecosystem she grew up in. I found that I had a knack for working with stone and wood. I learned how to build things, how to be useful with my hands. I sell small, handcrafted pieces of furniture in town, and I work part-time with the Conservation Trust, maintaining the trails and monitoring the health of the forest. We are no longer the scared, lost kids who stepped off that bus with nothing but a key and a desperate hope. We have a home. We have a purpose. We have a community. We have each other. Our inheritance wasn't the gemstones or the land itself. It was the choice our grandmother gave us, the choice to fight for something that mattered, the choice to define for ourselves what a home and a family and a meaningful life could be. Sometimes, when the world feels loud and complicated, I go deep into the cave, to the back chamber where the crystals glitter in the dark. I run my hand over the cool, rough rock, and I feel the strength of the mountain. I feel our grandmother's love, a steady, patient presence that has been with us all along. She built us a lifeboat, and it carried us through the storm to a shore we never could have imagined. And we, in turn, became its lighthouse keepers. This whole journey taught me that sometimes the most valuable things in this world are the things that other people overlook. A forgotten piece of land, a couple of kids the system wrote off, a handful of old letters. But these are the things that can save you. They are the seeds from which a new life can grow. And that's a truth I want to share. If you've made it this far into my story, thank you. It means you understand something about being an outsider, about having to find your own way. Maybe you've had to build your own shelter too. If this story resonated with you, if it stirred something in your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're building a community here for people who know what it's like to fight for their place in the world. And I want you to do one more thing for me. In the comments below, I want you to tell me, what does the word home mean to you? Is it a place, a person, a feeling? I will read every single one of your answers because your story matters. We all have a mountain to climb and a cave to call our own. We just have to be brave enough to start the journey. Thank you for listening.